Welcome to Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Part 2. Have you ever had someone take up way too much space in your head? You know that person you couldn't stop thinking about? You check your phone every 5 minutes, replay every word of every conversation, and convince yourself there's hidden meaning in a text that simply responds, "Okay." Never felt love like it. If that sounds familiar, you might have been in limerence. Limerence is the feeling of love on steroids. It's intense, consuming, and often completely exhausting. It's that delicious agony where your heart races at a message and then crashes into despair when they don't reply. It feels magical, but it's not magic. It's chemistry and psychology. So in today's episode, we're going to unpack what limerence really is, why it happens, and most importantly, how to heal from it. Because while it can feel like the most powerful connection of your life, it's often a reflection of your deepest unmet needs. The word limerence was coined by psychologist Dorothy Tennov in the 70s. She described it as an involuntary state of intense romantic desire, obsession, and emotional dependency on another person. When we're in limerence, the person we fixate on becomes a kind of emotional drug. The brain releases dopamine, the feel-good chemical, every time there's a hint of reciprocation. Then, when there's distance or uncertainty, dopamine drops, then we go into withdrawal. That's why limerence feels so addictive, because it literally is. It runs through the same reward pathways as gambling or substance addiction. You get the high when they call and the crash when they don't. And before you know it, you're checking your phone constantly like it's a life support machine. But here's the thing. Limerence isn't about love. Love, for the most part, is calm, secure, and mutual. Limerence is fueled by fantasy, uncertainty, and longing. It's not about knowing someone, it's about imagining them. We project our hopes and dreams onto them like a movie screen. And when reality doesn't match, we edit the script instead of changing the film. I see it constantly. Wonderful clients, so deserving of love, who are completely caught in the trap. Clients who are convinced deep in their bones that they can't survive without the person who routinely breaks their heart. They elevate their limerence object to a pedestal, seeing them as something irreplaceable and godlike, a source of life they simply cannot live without. In that state, they completely forget their own worth and all that they truly deserve. They're desperately trying to escape the pain, but they mistakenly believe their only route to freedom is through the very person causing the misery. And here's the crushing part. Even when these clients finally reach their breaking point, when the misery of staying becomes too much to bear and they make the rational, courageous choice to walk away, the fight still isn't over. They leave, but they haven't yet convinced their nervous system that this is the best thing to do. Like I've mentioned so many times before in my other podcasts, your brain prioritizes the path that's familiar, even if it's painful, because it equates familiarity with safety. When they leave that toxic, high-stakes attachment, their body doesn't register freedom, it registers abandonment and a profound, unsettling shift in routine. This triggers a massive panic response. Their nervous system screams, "Danger." The known source of safety is gone. And what does that safety mechanism do? It immediately attempts to pull them back to the familiar source of chaos. It sends them desperately reaching for the phone, looking for a way back in, because to the primitive brain, the agony of the addiction is still more predictable and therefore safer than the stark terror of the unknown. That's when the whole agonizing cycle starts again, dragging them right back into the pain they just fought so hard to escape. This is why breaking free requires more than just willpower. It requires rewiring the deep primal wiring of the brain. So where does limerence come from? Usually from the parts of us that didn't get what they needed when we were little, often stemming from early childhood, experience of neglect or inconsistent caregiving. If we grew up craving attention, affection, or validation, our nervous system might still be wired to chase it. Think of it this way. When we're babies and young children, we have a vital primal need for consistent, reliable connection. We need to know that we're seen, that we're worthy of attention, and that the person caring for us will be there. If those early experiences involved neglect or inconsistent caregiving, your developing brain learns a few things that create the perfect storm for limerence later in life, such as the scarcity mindset. And this is when care was inconsistent, sometimes warm and attentive, sometimes cold or absent, and your brain develops a scarcity mindset around love. You learn that emotional connection is something you have to work for, chase, and earn, often in extreme ways. Limerence, with its high stakes intensity and emotional roller coaster, mirrors that early childhood experience of uncertainty. You're not looking for love. You're looking for the feeling of finally winning a love that felt out of reach. Then there's the unfinished business. The limerent object, that's the person you're fixated on, acts as a kind of psychological stand-in for that original caregiver. They become the blank screen onto which you project those unmet needs. You're subconsciously trying to complete the unfinished business of your childhood to finally get the validation, the attention, or consistent devotion you missed. The desperate yearning and obsession are often the sound of that inner child demanding the connection that it was denied. And we have the predictable dopamine loop. Inconsistent caregiving creates an internal pattern called intermittent reinforcement. This is the psychological mechanism that drives addiction. Because you only got what you needed sometimes, your brain creates a massive rush of dopamine whenever the limerent object shows you the slightest bit of attention. This creates a relentless, addictive cycle of chase and reward. You're not addicted to the person, you're addicted to the high of temporarily filling that old primal deficit. Our brains are comforted by what they know, not what's healthy. So we might unconsciously seek out people who trigger that old longing. It's not that we want to suffer, it's that our brain is trying to finish an old story in the hope that healing can be achieved. Limerence often attaches to someone who represents something missing within us. Confidence, freedom, passion, validation. They become a mirror for our unhealed parts. We don't just want them, and this is really important. We want the version of ourselves we feel we could be with them. And that's powerful. It's why it's so hard to let go. Because it's not just about losing a person. It feels like losing a part of our identity. You could say limerence is our inner child reaching out through fantasy saying, please notice me. Please choose me this time. Ultimately, understanding limerence means seeing it for what it is. A massive adult attempt to heal a tiny wounded inner child. It's a part of your past. When you're in it, limerence is all-consuming. It's the constant daydreaming, the accidental scrolling through their socials, the mental analysis of every word and every emoji. It's hope and despair over and over again. When there's contact, your whole body lights up. It's electric. When there's silence, you crash. You can't eat, you can't sleep. And you start to convince yourself you're going mad. But you're not mad. You're hooked. You're addicted. Uncertainty and intermittent reward keep your brain's reward system firing. It's the same mechanism that keeps gamblers pulling the lever on a slot machine, the maybe this time, that keeps you coming back. And here's the most ironic part. The more unavailable the person, the more intense the limerence often becomes, because it's the not knowing that keeps the fantasy alive. Once you actually get to know them and see their flaws, once you experience the ordinary side of them, the spell starts to break. And this can feel confusing because it makes you realize you weren't addicted to them. You were addicted to how they made you feel. You know what? I want to bring something else in here that is rarely talked about, but is hugely relevant and kind of fits hand in hand with limerence, really. And it's called cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is that uncomfortable mental tension we feel when we hold two conflicting beliefs at the same time, and your brain just doesn't know which one to settle on. It's like, on the one hand, you might know logically, this person isn't available, they're inconsistent, they're not meeting my needs, actually, they're a bit of a dick. But emotionally, you feel and tell yourself, but they're the one and I'll never love like this again. I just can't live without them. Ever felt like that? If your answer is no, then you're one of very, very few. Anyway, that pull between the logic and the emotion creates a tension in the mind that feels incredibly uncomfortable. So uncomfortable that the brain tries to reduce the discomfort, the shock, pain, or whatever by bending the story. So rather than looking at the evidence, the brain starts focusing on tiny crumbs of hope, replaying old special moments, romanticizing who this person could be, or reading mixed signals as something meaningful. And that isn't because you're weak, it's literally the mind trying to calm that internal conflict. However, when reality and fantasy clash repeatedly, the evidence of the reality becomes too heavy for the fantasy to carry. And that's when the limerence starts to loosen. Because when your inner story finally matches the actual evidence, the brain no longer has to juggle two competing realities, and the fantasy starts to fall away, and clarity and peace begin to return. But this happens over time and needs patience and consistency. So how do we heal from limerence? The first step is awareness. Call it what it is. Label it limerence, because once you name it, you start to separate yourself from it. Then ask yourself, what need is this person symbolically meeting for me? What feeling do I get from them that I struggle to give myself? When did I first feel this type of longing? You might find the answers take you back to childhood, to those moments you felt unseen or unworthy, waiting for someone to notice you. Healing is about bringing the focus back home and reparenting yourself with patience and compassion. It's learning to meet those needs within yourself instead of outsourcing them to another person. That might mean practicing self-soothing when you feel the urge to check your phone. It might mean writing things down to separate the fantasy from reality, writing down who they actually are, not who your imagination wants them to be. Or it might mean talking to a therapist or coach who can help you gently explore the root wounds underneath the obsession. And please be patient with yourself. Limerence doesn't dissolve overnight. Your brain and nervous system need time to adjust. You're essentially going through withdrawal from a chemical loop. But every time you resist feeding the fantasy, you're rewiring your brain a little more towards peace. Every time you choose reality over illusion, you're building emotional strength. Over time, the person who once felt like oxygen becomes just another chapter in your story, a teacher who showed you where you still needed to heal. And when you reach that point, something healing happens. You start to crave calm instead of chaos. You begin to recognize that real love isn't a cycle of crazy highs followed by crushing lows. It's a steady warmth. It doesn't make your heart race with anxiety. It makes your nervous system relax. It doesn't pull you away from yourself. It brings you home to yourself. So if you're listening to this and recognizing yourself in what I've said, please be kind and show yourself some compassion. Limerence isn't a weakness, it's a human response to unhealed pain. It's your heart's way of trying to complete an old story. You were simply trying to feel alive and connected and loved, and those are beautiful instincts. You just happen to direct them towards someone who couldn't meet you there. The gift of limerence, when you heal from it, is that it teaches you about you. It shows you where your deepest desires live, what your heart truly longs for, and what needs you love the most. Healthy, genuine attention, tenderness and care. Real love, the kind that lasts, won't leave you anxious or guessing. It won't feel like a chase. It'll feel like coming home, calm, safe, mutual and free. So remember, the core truth about limerence, it's not a reflection of the other person's perfection. It's a reflection of your own unmet needs begging for attention. You've spent weeks, months, or even years trying to earn validation from someone who can't possibly give it to you. Now is the time to bring that focus home. Healing isn't about fighting the obsession. As I said, is about reparenting yourself. Your focus is to become the stable, consistent source of love that your inner self has always deserved. And if anything in this episode has resonated with you, if you've recognized yourself here, I want to say this. Limerence doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It's just that somewhere along the way, something happened that made you question your worth, weaken your boundaries, lower your expectations, or doubt that you could ask for more. But my guess is you are worth so much more than you've been made to feel. You deserve the kind of love that you don't have to chase, the kind of love that doesn't keep you guessing, the kind of love that feels safe, steady, and kind, not painful, proving, or exhausting. And I truly believe that if you could see yourself through the eyes of the people who genuinely love and value you, the people who really matter, you'd begin to see it too. Nothing about you is too much. You are simply asking for connection in the only way you knew how and looking for it in the wrong places. You are capable of deep, healthy connection, but you have to choose to be worthy of your own time and your own energy first. The cycle breaks when you decide that your own peace is more important than the pursuit of a fantasy. So start investing in the most important relationship of all, the one with yourself. There is so much more for you than this, and life is far too short to settle for less.